A 73-year-old Marine sat crying outside a police station, clutching his son's flag. Minutes later, he was tased, cuffed, and bleeding. And just 8 minutes after that, the Marines arrived to deliver the news. Raymond Eugene Ellis didn't plan on ending up in front of the Stonebridge Police Department that morning. At 73, his legs weren't what they used to be, and his memory wasn't sharp. But there were two things he never forgot: his son's birthday and how to fold a flag. He was holding one of them now. It sat in his lap, neat and triangular, cradled like it might blow away if he let go. Beneath it, dangling from his fingers, were a pair of scratched dog tags that clinked gently every time he moved. His knees touched the edge of the sidewalk, and he stared at the asphalt like it was trying to speak to him. He'd walked here, nearly 2 miles from his house to the police station, though no one saw him leave. Raymond didn't even put on socks, just his old boots, the ones with the steel toes and cracked soles. The local weather was holding back rain. Grey sky, cool breeze. Traffic was light. People passed by in their cars, barely glancing at him. Just an old man sitting at the curb. No real trouble. Except for one. A woman named Dana Qualls had pulled out of the grocery store parking lot across the street when she saw him. She slowed her car, watching. She didn't recognize him. He looked distressed. His head kept twitching to one side, and he was mumbling to himself. At one point, he stood up and walked in a small circle, then sat back down with the flag tighter in his arms. She hesitated. Then she called 911. "Hi, yes. There's this older man just sitting outside the police station," Dana told dispatch. "He looks confused, and maybe a little agitated. I don't know. I just thought someone should check on him." The call was logged at 11:43 a.m. Dispatch radioed officers already on patrol. Officer Chad Bannister and Officer Lisa Rainey, both just a few blocks away, finishing up paperwork in the cruiser. At 11:48 a.m., their unit pulled into the parking lot of the police station. Raymond didn't flinch. He didn't move at all, really, until Officer Bannister's boots came within 3 feet of him. "Sir?" Bannister said, voice clipped, professional. "Everything all right here?" Raymond glanced up. His eyes were rimmed red, glassy and wet. His lips moved slowly. "Desmond," he said. "My boy." "Desmond, you're gone." Rainey stepped closer. "Sir, are you okay? Can you stand up for us?" Raymond looked down at the flag in his lap. "They said it was instant." He mumbled. "Didn't feel a thing, they said. Didn't suffer. That's what they say when they don't want to tell you how bad it was." Bannister straightened. "We need you to stand up, sir. You're making people nervous sitting here like this." The dog tags fell from Raymond's hand and clattered on the pavement. He reached down, slow, to pick them up. Bannister moved toward him quickly. "Sir, I said get up now." Raymond didn't look at him. His back was stiff, knees bent, the folded flag still in one hand. "I fought," he whispered. "And so did he. We both fought for this country. Last warning," Bannister said, his hand moving to his belt. "Stand up or you're going to be detained." Rainey hesitated, something in her face suggesting doubt, but she didn't speak. Raymond just sat still. A heavy exhale. He seemed lost in a memory, and then the pop. Electricity hit his shoulder first, then spread. Raymond let out a sound like a bark. His body stiffened, legs kicked. The flag flew from his lap onto the sidewalk. He collapsed forward, hitting the ground hard. One side of his face scraped the cement. Blood darkened his cheek. A few people outside the DMV next door stopped and stared. One man pulled out his phone. Rainey moved quickly, securing his wrists with cuffs, her expression unreadable. Raymond groaned, the sound buried in his chest. "I told you," Bannister muttered, almost to himself. But 8 minutes later, the tone in that parking lot would shift so sharply, it would haunt them both for the rest of their lives. Lieutenant Colonel Andre Wallace had been to over 70 funerals during his career. Burials, folded flags, 21 gun salutes. He'd memorized the weight of silence, when a family hears confirmation their loved one isn't coming home. But this one felt different. He and Gunnery Sergeant Melissa Park sat quietly in the government SUV, just 2 minutes from their destination. The ride from Dobbin's Air Reserve Base to Stonebridge had been smooth until they hit the strip near the town square. Melissa adjusted the folded ceremonial uniform draped across the seat beside her. Desmond Ellis's Blues. She didn't know him personally, but he was one of theirs. A corporal. Iraq and back. No marks on his record. Not a scratch of trouble. Andre glanced at the GPS. 2 turns left. Melissa was staring out the window. This town's quiet. Reminds me of Macon. Don't let the calm fool you, he said. Pain doesn't make noise. She didn't respond. The notification package was in the back seat. Sealed envelope, personal effects, and the final salute documents. Raymond Ellis was next of kin. They'd been briefed before departure. He was a retired Marine sergeant, long since out, but proud. Had a heart condition. Lived alone. They weren't ready for what they were about to find. As they turned into the lot beside the police station, Andre spotted the patrol car. 2 officers. 1 male standing rigid. 1 female kneeling. Something was off. Melissa narrowed her eyes. Is that... Stop the car, Andre said, voice clipped. Melissa braked hard. Raymond was on the ground, face to pavement. His wrists were cuffed behind his back. The ceremonial triangle, the folded flag, lay nearby in a shallow puddle. One side of his face was scraped raw. Andre threw his door open and stepped out before the car had even fully stopped. He approached fast, every step louder than the last. Hey, he barked. What is this? Officer Bannister turned, startled. Sir, we're handling a situation here. That's Sergeant Ellis, Andre shouted. We're here for him. Melissa was already out of the car, moving toward Raymond with a stunned look. You used a taser on him. He refused to comply. Bannister answered quickly, eyes shifting between the uniformed Marines and the small crowd forming across the street. He was making a scene and wouldn't stand up. Melissa ignored him. She knelt beside Raymond, gently touching his shoulder. Sergeant Ellis, can you hear me? Raymond shifted slightly, wincing. His voice came low, broken. They said, Desmond gone. Melissa's jaw tightened. She looked up at Bannister, then Rainey. You tased a grieving father in front of a police station while he held a flag. Rainey's face cracked then, not with guilt, but something like panic. Her mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, but no sound came. I need EMS, Melissa said, eyes on Andre. Now, Bannister hesitated. Andre stepped forward, eyes hard. Call the ambulance. Don't make me say it again. Officer Bannister finally reached for his radio. Melissa stayed beside Raymond, her hand on his wrist, her voice soft. You're okay now. We're here. We came to tell you in person, with honor. Not like this. Raymond's eyes fluttered closed. A woman from across the street shouted, Is someone filming this? Another pulled out her phone. Andre stood still, staring at the crumpled figure on the pavement. Raymond Ellis had served his country. Buried friends, raised a son who'd done the same. And this was how his service, his grief, was acknowledged. Melissa gently lifted the folded flag off the wet concrete and wiped it with her sleeve. She sat beside Raymond and didn't move. The ambulance arrived 5 minutes later. The paramedics didn't ask many questions. They lifted Raymond carefully, placed him on a stretcher, and rolled him into the back. Melissa climbed in with him. Before the doors closed, she looked at Andre and said one word. Stay. Andre turned back toward the officers. Bannister stepped forward. Look, we didn't know. You didn't ask. Andre snapped. You didn't look. You saw a black man on a curb and assumed threat. You didn't see a father. You didn't see a Marine. Silence. You know what 8 minutes cost you? Andre said. The rest of your careers. But the real reckoning hadn't even started yet. That began when the footage came out. By the time the footage started spreading online, it was late that same night. The first clip was only 27 seconds. Grainy phone video from across the street. It showed an elderly man, Raymond, lying motionless on the pavement, face bloodied, with a uniformed Marine standing over him. The flag beside him was soaked. The audio was shaky, but you could hear someone say, They tased him, even after he said his son died. The comments came fast. This man served and they tased him while he was mourning? Someone better lose their job over this. Where was the humanity? By morning, the Stonebridge PD Facebook page had shut off comments. Their website crashed from traffic. News vans lined the street. Channel 11, 5, and even reporters from Savannah were now stationed outside the station. But inside, everything was tense and quiet. Officer Bannister was in the conference room. Rainey hadn't come in that morning. Captain Byron Reeves, head of the department, walked in without greeting him. He held a tablet in his hand and dropped it onto the table in front of Bannister. The paused frame on the screen showed Raymond Ellis being hit with the taser. "You saw this?" Reeves asked. "I followed protocol," Bannister said, rubbing his eyes. He didn't comply. Reeves stared at him. "You didn't recognize the flag? The dog tags?" He was mumbling. "I didn't know." Reeves cut him off. "He told you his name, his son's name. He showed you his ID. I thought he was confused." "He was confused," Reeves said, "because he just lost his son, and instead of treating him like a man in pain, you treated him like a threat." Bannister looked away. Reeves eyed, folding his arms. "You know the Marines were there to deliver the notification, right? Official military death visit. They were 8 minutes behind you." 8 minutes? "Yeah," Reeves said. "That's all it took. 8 minutes. You couldn't wait, couldn't listen, couldn't see him." The room went quiet again. Meanwhile, at St. Francis Medical Center across town, Raymond lay in a hospital bed with stitches above his cheekbone and bruises around his wrists. Melissa sat beside him. She hadn't left since the night before. Raymond hadn't said much, just stared at the ceiling or out the window. Andre walked in mid-morning with coffee in his hand. He set it down on the small table beside Melissa. "They called me," he said. "He's going home today." Melissa nodded. "He asked for Desmond this morning. I told him again. He just turned away." Andre sat on the edge of the chair. "How's his pressure?" "Stable," Melissa said. "But that's not the problem." Raymond slowly turned his head toward them. His voice, when he spoke, was almost a whisper. "He was all I had left." Andre leaned forward. "You're not alone, Sergeant." Raymond blinked. "You got kids?" Andre nodded. "2, a girl and a boy." "I had one," Raymond said. "One good boy. No trouble. Not one." Melissa reached for the folded flag on the table. She placed it in Raymond's lap. "I cleaned it," she said gently. "He earned it." Raymond touched the fabric, but said nothing. His eyes stayed fixed on the corners, as if remembering every fold he'd once taught his son to make. At the same time, back in Stonebridge, across the town square from the police station, a quiet protest had begun. It started with a small group of veterans. Some wore patches, others carried signs. One held up a photo of Raymond from 20 years ago in uniform. Another simply carried a sign that read, "Grief is not a crime." By noon, nearly 100 people had gathered. Donald Rivers, a longtime neighbor of Raymond's, stood in front of the cameras holding a photo of Desmond. "Raymond Ellis is a quiet man. Always was. Raised his boy with pride and discipline, helped him pay for school, never missed a birthday, never caused a problem in this town in 40 years. And this is what he got for sitting down to cry." The clip of Donald's speech made the local news. Then it hit Twitter. Then it hit national. A retired colonel from Texas reposted the video with the caption, "If you tase a grieving veteran holding a flag, you don't deserve the badge." Overnight, Raymond's name was everywhere, but he wasn't reading any of it. At home that evening, his living room still had Desmond's old photos, his Marine medals in a dusty frame, and a half-wrapped birthday gift on the couch that Raymond never got the chance to deliver. But there was one place he would go the next morning, a place he never thought he'd return to again. The first time Raymond Ellis put on a uniform, he was 17 and lying about his age. It was 1968. Vietnam was swallowing boys whole, but Raymond wanted out of his hometown in Augusta, Georgia. Not because he hated it, he just knew there was more beyond the railroad tracks and factory shifts. He wanted purpose, discipline, a reason to stand tall. He got all that and more. By the time he was 22, he'd buried 3 friends and had shrapnel in his thigh. He never talked about what happened in the jungle, not to neighbors, not to his wife, not even to Desmond. But he kept the medals in a drawer, not to show off, just to remind himself he'd survived something most people couldn't imagine. Raymond met Clara, his wife, at a VFW fundraiser in Tallahassee in the late 70s. She was working the table, collecting raffle money. He remembered how serious she looked counting bills, how she didn't smile much unless something genuinely moved her. That's what got him, her sincerity. They married in 81 and had Desmond a year later. One child. That's all they needed. Clara passed in 2005, breast cancer that took her quick. After that, Raymond threw himself into parenting. He cooked, cleaned, sat through Desmond's school concerts, football games, and late-night stomachaches. He never remarried. Said once, "Clara had the best parts of me. Ain't much left to offer anybody else." Desmond was quiet like his mother, but sharp. Real sharp. Top of his class, good with his hands. Raymond used to call him Little Engineer. But when Desmond turned 19, he came home one night and said he wanted to enlist. Raymond tried to keep his face neutral, but inside he was shaking. He'd seen what war did to men, what it did to him. "You sure?" he asked Desmond that night. Desmond nodded. "I want to serve." Like you, Raymond didn't sleep much that week. But he supported his son all the way. Attended boot camp graduation in Paris Island with his pressed blazer and polished shoes. First time he'd worn anything close to a uniform in years. Desmond was deployed to Iraq twice. Came back whole. Strong. Changed, sure, but solid. After his service, he planned to use the GI Bill to go into architecture. He even showed Raymond sketches of a house he wanted to build one day. A one-story ranch with wide windows and a porch big enough for grandkids. Raymond kept one of those sketches on his fridge. The morning he got the call, Raymond was doing what he did most Saturdays, sitting at the kitchen table, reading the obituaries with his coffee. It was a habit he never outgrew. The voice on the other end of the line was flat, official. "Mr. Ellis, we regret to inform you." He didn't hear the rest. He didn't even ask questions. He just hung up, put on his boots, grabbed Desmond's dog tags from the nightstand, folded the flag from his service days, and walked out the door. Neighbors would later say they saw him pass by, slow but steady. Some waved. He didn't wave back, just kept walking like a man headed somewhere important. And in his mind, he was. He thought maybe the police station could tell him if it was a mistake, or help him find someone who could explain it differently. Maybe, deep down, he thought if he showed up in uniform, they'd fix it, make it untrue. But they didn't even give him that chance. The next morning, Raymond stood outside his house for the first time since the hospital. The same boots, same jacket. Melissa and Andre were in the car waiting to drive him back to the police station. Not for another arrest, but for something harder. He looked down at the lawn. It hadn't been mowed. Desmond usually did it. Raymond shook his head, took a breath, and walked toward the car. Inside, Melissa handed him the documents. The death notification, final service papers, and a new ceremonial flag, untouched by rain or concrete. "We're going to meet with the chief," she said. "You don't have to say much." Raymond looked at the papers in his hands, then up at the sky. "Oh, I'll speak." But what Raymond had to say behind those doors wasn't just for the officers who tased him. It was for anyone who ever forgot how grief speaks. Desmond Clayton Ellis was one of those kids teachers remembered, not because he was loud or flashy, quite the opposite. He listened, sat in the second row, asked questions when nobody else did. By the time he hit high school in Warner Robins, Georgia, his reputation was already solid. Respectful, quiet, always early. Some called him old school, but those who knew him better understood he was just raised by a man who didn't believe in shortcuts. Every morning, Raymond packed Desmond's lunch and left a note in the bag. Nothing fancy, just a line or two. "Keep your head up. Make it count. Don't just be smart. Be kind." Desmond kept most of them, in a shoebox under his bed. He loved structure. Rules didn't scare him. They grounded him. That's probably why, when he started college and it didn't sit right, he didn't complain. He just came home one weekend, sat across from Raymond at the kitchen table, and said, "I'm thinking about the Marines." Raymond didn't speak right away. He folded his newspaper and pushed his glasses up. "You sure?" Desmond nodded. "I want to do something that matters." Raymond was quiet for a while. Then he said, "You already matter. Don't need a uniform to prove that." Still, he didn't try to stop him. He just hugged him longer than usual before he left for boot camp. Desmond thrived in the Corps, not because he was the toughest, but because he had grit. The kind you can't teach. That quiet kind. He wrote home often, called when he could, told his dad everything he could without breaking protocol. During his second deployment, he was stationed near Fallujah doing route clearance. Dangerous work. But Desmond never exaggerated. He'd say things like, "We're busy," or "Weather's brutal." Never dramatic, always calm. After discharge, Desmond returned to Georgia with big plans. He enrolled at Middle Georgia State University, started studying architectural design, bought drafting tools, kept his hair close cut even though nobody made him anymore. He still called his dad every Sunday night, even when they had nothing to talk about. The accident happened on a Tuesday. Desmond had driven up to Atlanta for a 2-day veteran workshop focused on green building strategies, something he was excited about. He'd been on I-75 coming south, just outside Forsyth, when an 18-wheeler jackknifed in the rain. Desmond's car was crushed on the driver's side. Emergency responders said he died instantly. The news barely made it past the local accident report, just another line in the logs. But to Raymond, it cracked the world in half. Desmond was 41, no kids, no wife, just his dad. And Raymond, who had outlived friends, a war, and cancer scares, now had to sit in silence in a house that echoed every time the air conditioning kicked on. The thing about Desmond that people always mentioned wasn't his work ethic, though that was rock solid, or his intelligence, which was obvious. It was the way he made you feel like what you were saying mattered. He could pause a conversation, tilt his head and really listen. The kind of presence that lingers. At Desmond's old community center, where he used to volunteer on Saturdays, they started a small wall display with photos and letters. One boy, about 12, wrote on construction paper, "Mr. D taught me how to use a ruler and told me it's okay to ask questions. I want to be like him." Raymond read that letter in the hospital. He didn't cry when he read it, just folded it and kept it in his pocket. When he spoke later at the police station meeting, people wouldn't understand the weight behind each word. They wouldn't see the thousands of Saturdays, the birthday candles, the old dog tags he kept on his dresser. But Raymond would remember every detail, every goodbye, every unfinished sentence, and every second that was stolen from him on that pavement. But before the department heard a word from him, the footage of Raymond's takedown reached someone who hadn't spoken publicly in over a decade, and who had something very personal to say. It was just after 7 p.m. when Julia Benedict saw the clip. She was seated on her back porch in Jacksonville, sipping black coffee, scrolling through her phone like she did every morning. At 67, she wasn't exactly tech-savvy, but one of her granddaughters had set up her social media feed to follow veteran support groups and local news pages. That's how she found it. A short, shaky video reposted by a retired Navy chaplain in Ohio. She froze as the frame showed Raymond on the pavement, hands bound, face bleeding. The flag, wet and crumpled, laid off to the side like trash. Julia didn't even realize she'd stood up until her mug tipped over, staining the wooden slats under her chair. She hadn't seen Raymond in almost 40 years. Back in Vietnam, she and Raymond had served near the same base in Da Nang. She was a nurse. He was infantry. They crossed paths after one of his squad mates got hit, and Julia had to patch him up. The two had written letters after their service, lost touch sometime in the mid-80s. She thought he'd passed, honestly. But now, here he was. Older, slower, still strong in the jaw and shoulders. And they tased him like he was nothing. By 8:30 a.m., Julia had made calls to 3 veteran networks, 2 advocacy groups, and 1 contact she still had at CNN. And she wasn't alone. Across the country, thousands of people had seen the same video. Twitter was flooded. Facebook pages shared Raymond's photo next to headlines like, "Marine veteran tased while grieving son." He said his son died, but that didn't stop them. 73-year-old veteran tased outside police station holding flag. The outrage was swift, and it wasn't just online. That afternoon, the American Legion headquarters in Indianapolis released a public statement condemning the officer's actions and demanding an independent investigation into the treatment of Sergeant Raymond Ellis, who served this country with honor. Raymond's name was trending by noon. At a VFW post in Macon, members gathered for their usual Thursday afternoon lunch. But the vibe was off. Conversations were tense. Anger simmered beneath every word. "Same age as me," one man said. "Could have been any of us." "He was grieving, for God's sake," another replied. "You don't tase grief." By 4 p.m., news vans were parked outside Raymond's house. The media hadn't reached him yet. Andre and Melissa were keeping them at bay. But they had plenty to run with. Photos of Desmond, background on Raymond's service, interviews with neighbors and family friends. One clip from Donald Rivers aired on every major network by evening. "I've lived next door to Raymond for 26 years, Donald said into the microphone, hands firm on the fence between their properties. "He mowed his lawn every Saturday, checked his mail like clockwork, raised that boy with more discipline than most people can stand. He fought for this country. And you're telling me the reward for that is a taser." Meanwhile, inside the Stonebridge PD, things were unraveling. Officer Lisa Rainey submitted a formal request for leave. She'd been quiet since the day of the incident, barely speaking to anyone. Her body cam footage, which had been reviewed internally, showed hesitation, discomfort. She hadn't deployed the taser. She hadn't stopped it either. Bannister, on the other hand, stood by his decision. "Non-compliance," he kept repeating. "We followed protocol, but protocol wasn't saving him now." Stonebridge's mayor, Leonard Grisham, called an emergency press conference by sundown. The room was packed. "We are reviewing the events that took place earlier this week involving Mr. Raymond Ellis," Grisham said stiffly. "Let me be clear. This incident does not reflect the values of our community or our police department. No apology. No acknowledgement of Desmond's death. No direct mention of the taser. It made things worse." The comments section under the live stream flooded with fury. "He didn't even say his name. This is the problem. No humanity. You call this leadership?" But behind the noise, Raymond remained still, quiet, watching. He sat in the same chair Desmond used when he called home from Iraq, the flag folded neatly beside him. His eyes stayed fixed on the screen. Melissa sat nearby. "You all right?" He didn't respond, just kept watching. Until finally he said, "They didn't see me." Melissa looked at him. "They do now, but recognition alone wasn't enough. Not for Raymond, not for Desmond, and not for what came next inside the walls of that police station." Raymond didn't want a lawyer. Not at first. But Andre convinced him. Not with threats or promises, just a quiet ride in the car. Silence broken only once when Andre said, "Letting someone speak for you doesn't mean you're silent. It means you're smart." So Raymond agreed. And that's how he ended up sitting across from Police Chief Alan Dobbins 2 days later, inside a conference room that smelled like disinfectant and weak coffee. The same room Bannister had sat in earlier that week. Raymond wore a pressed white shirt. The bruise on his cheek was fading, but the stitches were still in. Melissa sat to his right. On his left was his attorney, a sharp but calm man named Terrell Baines, a former Army JAG who now handled civil rights cases. Chief Dobbins sat across the table, his hands folded neatly. To his left, Bannister, arms crossed, jaw set. To his right, Officer Rainey, who couldn't seem to make eye contact with anyone. Terrell opened the folder on the table. "Before we begin," he said, "Mr. Ellis has prepared a statement." Raymond didn't read from paper. He didn't need to. He looked directly at Dobbins, then at Bannister. "I came here because I didn't know what else to do," he said. "I lost my son, only son. Got the call, couldn't breathe. My house was too quiet, so I walked." His voice wasn't loud, but it cut. "I walked with his flag. I sat where I thought someone would understand. And instead of a question, I got commands. Instead of a hand, I got volts. No one spoke. Raymond shifted in his seat, adjusting his shirt collar. I did 20 years in uniform. My son did almost 10. We bled for this place. We believed in something. Not perfect, but worth fighting for. And what did I get in return? I got cuffed like a criminal while my boy's name was still on my lips. Rainey's head dropped. Bannister didn't move. Chief Dobbins cleared his throat. Mr. Ellis, on behalf of the department... Raymond cut him off. No, don't read. Just say it. There was a pause. A deep one. Then Dobbins exhaled. You're right. You were failed. And we're responsible. That was the first time someone in that building had said those words. I don't want a press conference, Raymond said. I want change. Real change. Terrell slid a small packet across the table. These are recommendations we've drawn up. De-escalation training, veteran crisis protocols, bodycam review procedures, and we want Officer Bannister removed from duty pending investigation. Bannister's face darkened. I followed procedure, he said. I didn't know who he was. You didn't ask, Melissa snapped. You didn't bother to ask. Rainey finally spoke. Her voice was low. I wanted to stop it, but I froze. Raymond looked at her. You didn't freeze. You watched. Silence again. Dobbins picked up the packet and flipped through the pages. I'll review it, and I'll take it to the mayor personally. No delays, Terrell said. This isn't a suggestion. Bannister stood. You're going to hang me for doing my job? Dobbins turned to him. Sit down, officer. Bannister's eyes flared. No. I won't apologize for protecting the public. Raymond stood up slowly. Protecting who? From what? A flag? A crying father? Andre moved to stand as well, but Raymond put out a hand. Let him speak. Bannister looked at Raymond, and for the first time his voice cracked. I didn't know you were a Marine. Raymond tilted his head. So, if I was just an old man, no uniform, no service, then what? I'd still be face down in the dirt. No one answered. Raymond nodded to Terrell. We're done here. As he turned to leave, Rainey stood. Mr. Ellis? He paused. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't act. And I won't forget what that means. Raymond gave her a long look. Then, finally, a slow nod. Outside the station, a small crowd waited quietly. A few neighbors, some veterans, local journalists. No chants, no noise. Just presence. Raymond walked through them. Calm. Measured. Melissa walked beside him. Andre just behind. You sure you're okay? She asked. No, Raymond replied. But I'm sure I'm not staying quiet. But the next time Raymond would speak, it wouldn't be in a conference room. It would be in front of an entire town. And this time, the whole country would be watching. 3 days after this meeting, Raymond found himself sitting in the front row of a packed town hall. Stonebridge hadn't seen a turnout like this in years. The local council chamber, usually half empty and echoing with quiet policy talk, was overflowing. People stood along the back wall. More waited outside, watching the live feed on their phones. Veterans in uniform, young families, students. Everyone had come to hear what was going to happen next. A folding nameplate sat on the table in front of Raymond. Mr. Raymond E. Ellis, U.S. Marine Corps retired. Beside him, Melissa leaned in. You don't have to say much if you don't want to. Raymond kept his eyes on the council panel ahead. I want to. Mayor Leonard Grisham took the mic first. He looked stiff, like a man who'd practiced sincerity in front of a mirror all morning. We're here today, he began, to address a deeply troubling incident that has brought national attention to our town, and more importantly, has caused harm to a respected member of our community, Mr. Raymond Ellis. There was a murmur from the crowd. A few heads shook. Others listened quietly. We've reviewed bodycam footage, Grisham continued. We've read witness statements, and we've heard from Mr. Ellis's legal representation. This hearing is not only about accountability, but about making sure such an incident never happens again. One by one, council members gave short remarks. Some offered apologies, others stuck to legal phrasing. But most eyes weren't on them. They were on Raymond. When the floor was opened for public comments, the first to stand was Donald Rivers. He didn't need a microphone. I've lived next to this man for over 20 years, he said, and I can tell you if he's not safe sitting on a curb with a flag in his lap, then none of us are. Applause broke out. Someone from the back yelled, "Say that again!" A few others spoke after. Veterans, activists, even a teenage boy who'd seen the video and came with his mom. But it wasn't until Raymond stood that the room fell completely silent. He didn't walk fast, didn't speak right away, just stepped to the podium and looked around the room, scanning each face like he was making a memory. "I don't want pity," he said, voice clear. "Steady. I want respect." A beat passed, then another. "I've been through wars," he continued. "Seen things I won't repeat in polite company. I made peace with the world a long time ago. But nothing prepared me for the pain of losing my son. And nothing prepared me for how this town treated me when I tried to grieve." He held up Desmond's dog tags. "This was my son, Desmond Clayton Ellis. Not a number, not a report. A human being. He volunteered, he served, he dreamed of building homes. He died before I could tell him I was proud." The silence was thick. Even the cameras at the back stopped panning. Raymond glanced at the mayor. "You want to fix something? Start by teaching your officers to listen, to ask questions before they reach for a weapon. You can't train empathy in a weekend, but you can at least make it a requirement." Then he looked back at the audience. "To everyone who showed up for me, thank you. But don't just stand for me. Stand for the next father, the next mother, the next human being who breaks down in public and needs help, not handcuffs." The room erupted in applause, not the kind you hear at political rallies. Something deeper, raw, real. Mayor Grisham gave a tight nod as Raymond returned to his seat. Shortly after, the council voted to place Officer Bannister on unpaid administrative leave pending an external review. They also approved new mandatory training for all officers, including crisis response protocols involving veterans and the elderly. It wasn't justice, but it was something. Later that night, Raymond sat on his porch with Andre and Melissa. No cameras, no reporters. He stared into the distance, the dog tags in his palm, clicking gently against one another. "I almost didn't say anything," he admitted. "Thought maybe no one would care." Andre leaned back. "They did. And they will." Melissa looked out toward the street. "You changed more than you know." Raymond nodded slowly. "I just hope Desmond saw it." But before he could find closure, Raymond had one more stop to make. And it wasn't at the town hall or police station. It was somewhere far more personal. 2 days after the hearing, Raymond stood alone in front of his son's grave. The cemetery was quiet, tucked behind an old Baptist church just outside Perry, Georgia. Rows of headstones stretched across freshly cut grass, but Raymond only looked at one, the one that read, "Corporal Desmond Clayton Ellis, 1982, 2024, beloved son, Marine, dream builder." The air was warm. A light wind moved the flowers that someone, maybe Melissa, had placed beside the stone. They were fresh. Raymond didn't bring a speech. No flag, no ceremony. Just the sketch Desmond had drawn of the house he wanted to build, folded neatly in his jacket pocket. He stood there for a long time, one hand resting on the top edge of the stone like he was steadying himself. Then he spoke, not loud, just enough for the breeze to carry it. "I tried to do right by you, son." He looked down. "I didn't expect to outlive you. I don't think a parent ever does." His eyes watered, but no tears fell. They never came easy to him, not even at Clara's funeral. "I couldn't protect you from everything, but I made sure the world knows your name now, not because of what happened to me, but because of who you were." He pulled the sketch from his pocket, unfolded it carefully, and placed it at the base of the grave. A simple drawing of a house. Big porch. Trees out front. "You said you'd build this one day. I'm going to see it built. For kids who need it. For veterans who've got nowhere else. That's what you wanted, right?" He took a breath. The sun pressed against his back, warm and steady. "You weren't just my son, Des. You were my reason." Behind him, soft footsteps approached. Melissa stopped a few feet away, giving him space. "I figured you might be here," she said gently. Raymond didn't turn around. "He's still with me." "I know." she said. "And the town's not done talking about you either. They're holding a community event next month. Want to name the park trail after Desmond. Ellis Way." Raymond let out a quiet chuckle. He hated running. Melissa smiled. "Well, maybe now he gets to make everyone else run in his name." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Raymond said, "I was thinking of starting something. Small foundation, nothing fancy. A place for kids like Desmond wanted. Maybe workshops. A bed or two for veterans who need a place to land." Melissa nodded. "That sounds like him. You'll need help. I'll find the right people." "You've already got a few," she said, stepping beside him. Back in town, Officer Bannister had turned in his badge. It wasn't a firing. It wasn't public. But it was final. Sources said he'd left a short note in his locker. No apology, just 4 words. "I should have known better." As for Officer Rainey, she requested reassignment. Not to get away, but to try again. She started training with the department's Community Outreach Division. Her first assignment, meeting with local veteran groups to help draft new crisis response procedures. Stonebridge, for all its flaws, was trying. But Raymond wasn't waiting for the town to fix itself. He had something else in mind. 2 weeks later, he met with a small group of architects, social workers, and non-profit volunteers. They gathered in the back of the library with coffee, blueprints, and a copy of Desmond's house sketch pinned to a corkboard. "We don't need it big," Raymond said. "We just need it right." And slowly, something new began to grow from all that pain. A space for grieving families. A safe bed for the night. A class on job skills. A porch where someone could just sit, maybe with a flag in their lap, and not be seen as a threat. Raymond didn't want praise. He didn't want headlines. He just wanted purpose, the kind his son would have built with 2 hands. But even with all the support, all the changes, Raymond knew one thing deep in his bones. Closure doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward anyway. The camera panned slowly, capturing Raymond sitting in that same weathered chair on his front porch. The dog tags hung from his hand, swinging gently with the wind. The American flag, now sealed in a glass case, rested beside his feet. No music, just the sound of birds and the creak of the wood under him. He didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was soft, raw. "I keep thinking about the curb," he paused. "About how a place that's supposed to mean safety became somewhere I got hurt. I don't think that leaves you. Not really." He looked down at his palms. One had a scar now, faint but there. "But I've learned something since then. People are watching. They're paying attention, even when it's quiet. You think you're invisible until someone sees you hurt." Raymond raised his head, looked straight ahead. "After Desmond died, I stopped thinking about the future. I didn't even plan the next day. Just walked, because that's all I knew how to do." He took a breath. Now I wake up and try again. I don't have all the answers. I still feel the ache. I still hear my boy's voice when the house is too still. But I also see faces, strangers who showed up, neighbors who stood beside me, people who listened. The camera cut to footage from the town meeting. Veterans saluting. A child placing flowers near Desmond's grave. A young man sketching a house. Desmond's design on a classroom whiteboard. Raymond's voice continued. "If you see someone in pain, don't look away. Don't assume. Ask. Listen. Sometimes grief wears a uniform. Sometimes it just wears yesterday's clothes and a heavy heart." Cut back to Raymond. "I didn't ask to be seen. But I'm glad someone finally did." He stood up slowly, the screen now showing him walking across his yard, toward the gate where Desmond once parked his car. The screen faded to black with one line of white text. "In memory of Desmond Clayton Ellis. Loved, missed, never ignored again." Then the narrator came in. Clear, gentle, purposeful. Raymond's story isn't just about a man and his loss. It's about how we treat each other when nobody's watching. It's about noticing the man on the curb. We all have a choice. In every interaction, we can see a threat, or a human being. The line between the two? That's where dignity lives. The screen transitioned once more, now showing a phone number and a link to a real veteran crisis line, followed by a line of narration. If you or someone you know is struggling with loss, isolation, or just needs to be heard, don't wait. Reach out. Show up. Listen. Because silence doesn't mean strength, and grief doesn't make you dangerous. A pause, then a final line. For stories like this, real, raw, and true, hit that subscribe button. Share Raymond's voice, not because it's perfect, but because it matters. The screen faded to black.